Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking some absolutely wild, esoteric revelations about the lost continent we all know as Lemuria. But we're getting this straight from a very unique spiritual source text. We're going to explore these claims completely impartially, looking strictly at what the text presents and how it completely reframes a myth you probably thought you already knew.
The source material we're looking at is called The Truth of Lemuria, Spoken by the Gods. In this explainer, we'll be examining its highly specific and honestly pretty unexpected claims about ancient history, cosmic interventions, and lost civilizations. Now remember, we are not here to endorse these viewpoints. We're just the messengers, here to structure the exact narrative this fascinating book lays out so you can understand it for yourself.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our agenda for today. We'll be covering the phantom continent Lamudia, paradise of art and sensibility, two different views on art, Zeus's lightning and aliens, false god, and Enlil's identity, and finally, continent sinking and human lessons.
Section 1. The Phantom Continent, Lamudia.
So most of us have heard the name Lemuria, right? But our source text throws a massive curveball right off the bat. It frames Lemuria as just a later, earthly scientific hypothesis. Basically, 19th century scientists just named it after the habitat of lemurs in Madagascar. But the spiritual reading claims the actual, authentic, ancient pronunciation was actually much closer to Lamudia. So right away, we are completely reframing our starting point, from a scientific theory to an esoteric history.
Section 2. Paradise of Art and Sensibility.
Now, when you picture ancient histories, you probably imagine military conquests, basic survival, or maybe building massive stone pyramids. But Lamudia is described as a profoundly different kind of society. It was a prosperous era entirely defined by highly developed sensibilities. In the civilization, artistic talent wasn't just some weekend hobby. It was deeply respected as the absolute core pillar of their entire culture. So the crucial point is that in Lamudia, human evolution wasn't measured by technology or brute strength at all. It was measured by perception and aesthetics. The source text details how people who were highly artistic and had really refined senses were revered above everybody else. Having a highly tuned sensibility was essentially the ultimate status symbol of an advanced human being in this era.
Section 3. Two different views on art. And this brilliantly illustrates the massive ideological divide right at the heart of Lamudia. On one side, you've got the spiritual figure of Zeus. His philosophy valued one-of-a-kind, totally unique creations filled with divine inspiration and light. But then on the other side, we have Manu, who had a much more systematic approach. He wanted to peacefully evolve humanity through structured competition, evaluation, and scoring. It's literally the ultimate ancient debate between raw, spontaneous inspiration and structured, methodical refinement.
As the text explicitly summarizes in this quote, differences in their views on art. Zeus valued one-of-a-kind creations, whereas Manu sought evolution through competition. These differing approaches directly shaped the culture of Lamudia. Again, we're just impartially reporting these claims, but it's incredibly fascinating to see how the text uses well-known mythological figures to represent such deep, conflicting artistic philosophies.
Section 4. Zeus's lightning and aliens. Okay, take a breath, because we are about to take a dramatic turn into sci-fi territory. We all know the classical Greek myth of the god Zeus throwing magical lightning bolts from Mount Olympus to strike down his enemies, right? Well, what if it wasn't magic at all? Our source text poses a radical reinterpretation. What was the true identity of this legendary weapon? The text drops a complete bombshell here. According to these spiritual readings, Zeus's lightning was actually a destructive beam, essentially an advanced ray or laser. And get this, where did it come from? It was acquired through direct interaction with extraterrestrials. Specifically, the text mentions zeta reticulans. So ancient mythological magic is completely reframed here as advanced alien technology. No way, right?
Now, what's really interesting about the passage on screen is that it explicitly states that what humanity thought was the wrath of the gods was literally just a destructive beam obtained from these extraterrestrial interactions. It's a massive departure from classical mythology, but it's presented straight up as historical fact within this spiritual reading.
Section 5. False God and Enlil's identity.
Shifting gears from ancient myth to modern interpretations, the source text also seeks to set the esoteric record straight. In certain modern alternative spiritual circles, especially those following the teachings of Shinji Takahashi, there is a lot of talk about a figure named El Ranti. However, our source text takes a hard line against this, explicitly stating that El Ranti simply does not exist in reality.
It goes even further, actually recharacterizing Takahashi's spiritual origins entirely. The text claims his core spirit was actually Enlil. Now, the name Enlil pops up in ancient Sumerian text a lot, usually as a supreme creator deity. But this specific source text completely flips the script, identifying him strictly as an aggressive figure and a god of destruction. It's a huge reinterpretation of the spiritual narrative surrounding those modern teachings.
Section 6. Continent Sinking and Human Lessons. Let's move to the end and see how this all builds to the tragic fall of Lamudia. The text lays out a very clear, cautionary timeline. Step 1. Their culture of high artistic sensibility and beauty flourishes. But this ultimately leads to Step 2, an excessive indulgence in those very sensual pleasures. This indulgence results in Step 3, the moral corruption of the civilization's soul. And finally, the ultimate consequence, Step 4, the continent is entirely submerged into the sea by the direct will of the heavenly world.
And to put that into perspective, according to the source, this was not a slow, natural geological shift over millions of years. The text explicitly describes a sudden, catastrophic submergence. It was a rapid, world-ending event brought on by divine judgment, acting as a direct consequence of Lamudia's spiritual decay.
Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. If a civilization like Lamudia, one entirely defined by advanced art, deep sensibilities, and beauty, can ultimately corrupt its own soul through excessive indulgence and face sudden divine destruction, what does that mean for our modern world? Are we heading down the same path with our own endless pursuit of pleasure? It's a fascinating, esoteric cautionary tale to reflect on. Thank you so much for joining me to structure and understand this unique text today. Keep your curiosity sharp, and I'll catch you in the next explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating and honestly, highly unconventional source text. We're looking at translated excerpts from a book that dives deep into spiritual histories, lost continents, and some pretty intense claims about extraterrestrial intervention. It is a wild ride through a totally unique worldview, one that connects ancient cosmic forces right up to modern covert warfare. So we're going to break down exactly what this text claims and map out this massive, complex narrative.
Okay, let's dive into this. You might be wondering, what on earth connects ancient lost continents to modern UFO sightings? Well, that is the central mystery we are exploring today. Because according to the source material, human history isn't just some straight line of evolution. Nope, it's a cyclical saga, and it's deeply influenced by cosmic forces and unseen hands. Let's look at the key player the text introduces to guide us through this whole intricate history.
Starting with the concept of a guiding spirit, the text introduces a figure named Manu.
According to the source, Manu isn't just an abstract concept. He is a ninth-dimensional spirit. And his primary job? The text claims he's essentially in charge of multi-ethnic issues and complex political coordination up in the heavenly world. So we aren't talking about a passive observer just looking down on us. The source frames Manu as an incredibly active, guiding force who directly intervenes in global human affairs to shape our collective destiny.
This really illustrates just how active the text claims Manu has been. It attributes some major, world-changing historical movements to his secret, behind-the-scenes guidance. We're talking about the global liberation of Black people, the democratization of Russia, and the rapid development of India. The text even explicitly claims that Manu spiritually guided his quote-unquote soul brother, Mahatma Gandhi, toward India's independence. It's a sweeping reimagining of modern geopolitical history, viewed entirely through this spiritual lens.
Now, to understand the present, the text argues we have to look far back into the past, specifically to a tragic end.
When you crack open the source material, which translates to the truth of Lemuria told by the gods, you immediately see a distinct focus on completely redefining ancient myths. Specifically, the source claims the true, original name for the magnificent lost continent of Lemuria was actually Lamudia. It really asks us to re-examine everything we think we know about ancient human history.
So, what exactly happened to Lamudia? Well, the text claims that extraterrestrials from the Lyra constellation, specifically including the star system Vega, arrived on Earth, and they didn't bring peace and harmony. Instead, the source asserts they aggressively introduced intense scientific and technological competition to the Ramdians. This intervention supposedly shattered their tranquil existence and forever altered the trajectory of their entire civilization. And this builds into something truly terrifying. The text describes the alien technology with this highly dramatic quote. By manipulating the inherent vibrational frequencies, it is possible to split the Earth in two. The source claims the aliens introduced what it calls earthquake weapons. Think about that. Technology so devastating it could literally tear continents apart by targeting the planet's fundamental vibrational frequencies. The text paints a really stark contrast here. Picture a society that was deeply beautiful, focused heavily on artistry, music, and spirituality. That was Ramdia's original state. But their downfall was absolute. The text claims they completely abused the warfare technology introduced by the extraterrestrials. They used these earthquake weapons to destroy rival factions and ultimately ended up sinking their own continent with their own power.
But the source doesn't just leave this tragedy in the ancient past. It brings us into the modern era of secret alien pacts.
It connects this ancient history directly to modern geopolitics. Diving into the text's claims, we see a very bold assertion. The United States government has allegedly been making secret agreements with extraterrestrials ever since the famous 1947 Roswell incident. According to the narrative, the U.S. essentially traded recovered UFOs and alien bodies for highly advanced otherworldly technology.
The source actually maps out a pretty specific timeline for us. It all kicks off in 1947 with the Roswell incident. Then, post-1947, these secret agreements and technological exchanges supposedly begin in earnest. Over the following decades, the text claims the U.S. military receives stealth technology directly from these extraterrestrial transfers. And bringing it right up to the present day, the source asserts that the military is actively developing and flying triangular and diamond-shaped UFO prototypes out of secret bases.
This technological leap leads to a whole new kind of arms race. So the crucial point the text is making here is massive. It asserts that because of this newly acquired alien technology, traditional nuclear weapons are actually completely obsolete. The text claims the entire era of nuclear deterrence is already over. It's secretly been replaced by a covert arsenal that is far more advanced and practically impossible to detect on a global scale. And here, the source draws a stark, ominous parallel. Just like ancient Lamudia abused extraterrestrial earthquake weapons to destroy their enemies from within, the text claims modern America is walking that exact same path. They're developing stealth and plasma weapons from these secret alien treaties. It's a really dark warning that human history might literally be repeating its absolute worst mistakes. To give you an idea of what these modern weapons supposedly look like, the source lists some concepts that sound straight out of a sci-fi movie, but it claims they are real right now. This includes lasers capable of penetrating deep underground to destroy nuclear stockpiles without leaving a single trace on the surface. Even more alarming, the text warns of plasma weapons disguised as natural disasters. That means artificial, massive earthquakes and hurricanes could be used to attack enemies covertly, without ever declaring a formal war. It envisions a battlefield completely disguised as nature itself.
So, what is the way out of this? The text points toward a spiritual solution centered on Japan. How do we stop this hidden global arms race? Well, the text emphasizes that the ultimate deterrent against these hidden threats isn't building more advanced plasma weapons. Instead, it claims that Japan must become a globally respected nation, spiritually and philosophically. The source argues that sheer military power is only going to lead to another Lamudia, but profound spiritual influence and ideology, that can break the cycle of destruction.
This source actually outlines a specific step-by-step mission for Japan to prevent this modern tragedy. Step 1. Foster a great spiritual ideology. Step 2. Spread this ideology to influence the world. Step 3. Become a religiously and philosophically respected nation. And finally, Step 4. By doing all this, act as a global deterrent against foreign and hidden threats. It's a total, profound ideological shift from physical warfare to spiritual diplomacy.
It's just a vast, intricate narrative spanning from the ninth dimension down to ancient lost continents and right up to modern covert military operations. And it leaves us with a profound question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. If the source's warning is true, will humanity rise up to rewrite its history, or are we destined to repeat the tragedy of Lamudia? Thank you for joining me as we unraveled this fascinating text, and I'll see you in the next explainer. So what if I told you that one of the most famous lost continents in human mythology wasn't actually swallowed up by some tragic, random natural disaster? What if, instead, it was destroyed from the inside out by incredibly advanced, ancient weaponry? Have you ever considered that the whole legend of Lemuria might actually be a massive cautionary tale about a technological apocalypse?
Well, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to objectively unpack some truly fascinating source material. Today, we're looking at a book called The Truth of Lemuria, specifically focusing on Chapter 3 and the spiritual messages of a figure known as Manu. What is so absolutely captivating about this text is how it takes the ancient, esoteric history of this lost continent and directly ties it to modern-day religious administration and spiritual battles. We're going to examine exactly what the text claims happened thousands of years ago, and how those past warnings are literally shaping contemporary religious decisions today.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with number 1, the true Lamudia civilization, and 2, their religion of harmony. Then 3, their downfall by advanced science. After that, we'll jump to the present day for number 4, the threat of Amariel, 5, protecting the doctrine, and finally 6, the mission for world peace.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the true Ramdiel civilization.
Right off the bat, the source material clarifies our terminology here. So while popular culture generally refers to this lost landmass as Lemuria, the spiritual messages state that its true esoteric name, and actually the most accurate pronunciation, is Ramdia. So just to be clear, for the rest of this explainer, we'll be calling it Ramdia.
Now, the source attributes an incredibly diverse demographic makeup to Ramdia. According to Manu's messages, this was definitely not a homogeneous society. The continent was populated by a mix of what the text categorizes as the red race, the white race, and the brown race. But get this, it doesn't stop there. The text asserts that they openly coexisted with various extraterrestrial visitors who had vastly different appearances. It describes this bustling, highly integrated society where humans and star visitors were literally interacting on a regular basis.
Moving right along to Section 2, religion of harmony.
So according to the source, the unifying faith for all these diverse beings was something called the religion of the harmony of beauty. The spiritual messages explain that this whole belief system originated from the laws of Venus. And this wasn't about rigid dogma or strict rules. Instead, it heavily emphasized a really profound harmony with nature, deep emotional sensibility, and the cultivation of artistic talent. In Lamudia, artistic ability was revered above pretty much everything else. It was their core.
But as you'll see, that pure harmony was eventually threatened. The pure Venusian laws, love, harmony, art, and sensibility, they ended up clashing with a very different influence brought in by some of those visiting extraterrestrials. See, because Ramdai was technically a developing world compared to the star visitors, the locals were introduced to the temptations of advanced science, technological power, and eventually the whole concept of combat superiority. The text paints this vivid picture of a major cultural clash between peaceful artistic values and the super alluring, corrupting power of high-tech dominance.
Which brings us to a really dark turning point in Section 3, downfall by advanced science.
Let's walk through this rapid, fatal escalation exactly as it's outlined by the source. Step 1. Alien science and technology are introduced to the Ramdidian people. Step 2. Instead of maintaining their pure focus on art, the inhabitants start blending their artistic sensibilities with this new, frankly intoxicating desire for power. Step 3. The peaceful artistic competitions that used to define their society, well, they mutate into fierce competitions for combat superiority. And finally, Step 4. This entire arms race culminates in the deployment of terrifyingly advanced technology, specifically what the text calls earthquake weapons.
The source is super specific here, pointing out that the sinking of Ramdia was absolutely not a natural tectonic shift or some random flood. Instead, the continent was fractured by intense inner warfare using unprecedented weaponry. The spiritual readings describe these blinding light beams that resembled modern nuclear blasts, and most notably, the use of those earthquake weapons I just mentioned, which could manipulate the Earth's vibrational frequencies to literally split the landmass right in two. It's just a stark, terrifying narrative of complete self-destruction.
So you might be wondering, how does Ramdia's ancient fall connect to modern spiritual battles? Like, why is this esoteric history from 29,000 years ago relevant to us today? How does it connect to the administrative challenges of a modern religious movement? Well, let's move forward and see exactly how the source elegantly bridges this massive chronological gap.
Okay, Section 4, the threat of Amariel.
This is where the source introduces a very specific modern antagonist, Amariel. The text claims she is a female demon of the Lucifer lineage.
And her primary goal, according to these spiritual messages, is to actively cause confusion and division right within the modern faith. She's reportedly doing this by possessing a medium in a heretical sect, effectively sowing chaos from the outside in. It's actually a lot like how those disruptive alien technologies worked in ancient Remedia.
The original text actually goes into her origins, stating she acts as a niece to Lucifer and holds a seriously high rank, roughly number 3 among female demons in that particular spiritual hierarchy. And it's important to note, the book treats this not as a metaphor, but as an objective spiritual reality, a real threat that requires a direct, defensive, administrative response from the church's leadership.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 5, Protecting the Doctrine. So how do they defend against this? The source details specific administrative actions taken to maintain doctrinal purity. In the early era of the movement, a spiritual teacher named Shinji Takahashi published channeled messages. However, his mission's scope was explicitly limited to a short transitional period of about 5 years. In stark contrast, the current leader, Ryuho Okawa, is described as bringing the much vaster Great Tagatha laws, which are meant to serve as the foundation for a world religion. As a result of this major transition, and to protect those new, broader teachings, Takahashi's early books were deliberately taken out of print.
Now, the source is crystal clear about the reasons for this out-of-print status. It wasn't just some arbitrary decision. The primary goal was to prevent doctrinal confusion, which, as we just discussed, is the exact kind of confusion entities like Amariel allegedly tried to exploit. The text notes that Takahashi's mission was always meant to be brief, that there were some inevitable errors and inconsistencies in those early messages as the teachings evolved, and that the emergence of the far more comprehensive Great Tathagata teachings simply made the older texts obsolete.
The source really emphasizes that pulling these books is absolutely not an attempt to maliciously erase history. Instead, it's framed as a necessary, protective administrative step. By cutting off access to outdated or inconsistent materials, the leadership believes they are maintaining the absolute integrity of the modern religious movement against outside corruption. Think of it as a modern-day defense mechanism.
And this all builds up to Section 6, Mission for World Peace.
The text culminates in this incredibly powerful, overarching mandate for the believers. It states the absolute necessity of developing these teachings, which originated in Japan, into a global world religion to eliminate ethnic conflicts and wars from the earth. This is the ultimate solution presented by the source. The goal here isn't just about personal enlightenment. It's a massive, global mission to eradicate the very conflicts that completely destroyed Lamudia.
To tie this whole shebang together, the source material posits that doctrinal purity is the ultimate shield. By identifying external threats like Amariel, and by taking strict administrative actions to keep the teachings unified and pure, the faith aims to protect all of humanity. They firmly believe that only through this uncorrupted, harmonizing doctrine can we avoid repeating the ancient, absolutely devastating mistakes of Lemuria.
So, I'll leave you with this to chew on. If the story of Lamudia is indeed an ancient blueprint of technological hubris and spiritual decay, what does that mean for us today? Will humanity actually learn from the forgotten ashes of Lamudia? Or, without the proper spiritual guidance, are we destined to repeat its explosive history? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning, keep learning.